All right, guys, welcome back to the pod, back to Theory and Theology. So, today I got a quick one on my way to the gym. My friend introduced me to this idea called Passport Bros. So, I didn't know what that was. I kind of looked into it and I was like, oh, like, this is a thing. So, there's this trend, I guess, that people are theorizing that there's a lot of men, mostly, it sounds like cis hetero men, interested in finding a partner who's a cis hetero woman, and they're looking for more traditional women, maybe women who aren't like so into feminism, women that have, you know, traditional gender role ideals as far as like what the man does, what the woman does, that kind of thing. So there's this theory kind of going around, or an idea going around that, you know, a lot of men are working remotely or finding jobs outside of the US to go live in other countries, lots of other types of countries, Thailand, different European countries, different Asian countries, because they, you know, and they're finding, I don't know if they're leaving there to find the women, or if they're leaving there and just happen to interact with the general public and find women that are, you know, kind of meeting more what they prefer, as far as, you know, how they would like their future partners to be. And so, that's an interesting idea, right? It's like, I don't know what to do with it. Like, I don't know if it's accurate as explained. But I have noticed over at least the last year, if maybe not more, I say if not more, because, you know, a lot of times I'm pretty slow to jump on, you know, new ideas, because I'm kind of in my own world with my own interests and my own ideas, and it usually isn't very interesting. Like, I don't tend to find a lot of the mainstream media to be that interesting. I mean, some of the stuff that I find, I try to share it on here if I think it might be of interest to people who kind of like to like have conversations about like your mind being expanded and things. Like, it's not really my intention to be like, let's be controversial and like argue and fight and get mad about everything. So usually when it comes to those the content that's by people kind of like Andrew Tate, his followers, his fans, a lot of the males who kind of are kind of into that. Now, I'll say, you know, I try not to give people too much crap. I don't know if there's some conspiracy around him, or if everything that's coming out is true or not. I have no idea. I am not the person to speak on this. I am not the person who would know. I know what people say in different news stories, but also it's their job, you know, to sensationalize things sometimes. So it's really hard for me to really fully trust. I would say, in my opinion, it's probably there. Part of what he says is probably true. Part of what they say is probably true. And it's probably somewhere in the middle. I'm not the kind of person who's like, oh, blame the victim. If somebody had someone abusing them, let's blame them and be like, this other person is off the hook and let's make any excuse for them to seem more right. I mean, I would hate if he really is abusive towards other people. That's why I'm like, why would someone have any incentive to really say that, you know? But also, I mean, he's very famous he debates very well. And he's a really good businessman. I don't know as far as his ethics towards what he does in business, but as far as what I've studied for what he's done as far as providing community for young men, now he's doing something to try to help people who are young men to try to feel like they have somebody kind of on their side. And there are a lot of guys who are out there who kind of have this this brand where they're like, I like seeing that. I'm not talking about the abuse or all this other like nonsense type of stuff that I don't really know what it is. But if I just look at the business side of things, I'm like, this guy, I like the idea of him seeing like, hey, like my community's struggling. You know, I've seen it with black people in tech a lot too. And people seeing their own community and saying, hey, my community is struggling. I need to make some kind of program for them where, yes, I'm going to win when people buy into this, but it's actually legit with like reviews where people have success and are able to like gain an income and become independent that way. And like, I like seeing that. All the other stuff, I don't really know what to even say about it. I hope it's not true, but there's probably some, if not a lot of truth to it, which is unfortunate. But a lot of times some of these people, you know, we all have our histories. I can mostly just hope for the best that, you know, him turning to Islam is hopefully gonna help him with some of his ethical dilemmas that he might be facing, or practicing anything that's kind of like against certain people, exploitation, abuse, all that kind of stuff. I'm not really into that, but I try to look at both sides. I'm not trying to just let people off the hook because I'm just trying not to have an opinion. But I have seen that a lot of males out there, guys in their 20s, 30s, you know, are coming up with a lot of content that's kind of explaining their experience, and I think is worth listening to. I mean, I'm a woman. I don't really date that many guys. I have dated guys, but I don't generally like gravitate towards them for the most part, so I don't really care. Like, I don't really have a dog in the fight a lot of times when I'm like, oh, like this man is over here saying all this stuff. It's kind of like whatever. Like, I don't usually have to deal with guys that are like that, so it's not really something that's like affecting me firsthand. I hear my friends, a lot of my straight friends, my cis straight friends, they're oftentimes very upset by the dating world, but my dating world is so different from their dating world that it's kind of hard to relate sometimes. But yeah, there are these like overarching ideas where it's like these men, you know, a lot of men are feeling like, I mean, there's so many layers to it, but they're feeling like there's something with Western or American women who are kind of wanting them for their money, having these expectations that they don't prefer. And with the economy as it is, I could see how, you know, if I were, you know, in a guy's shoes where somebody was like, oh, take me out on a date, like, it's hard enough for me to want to even go hang out with my friends because it costs so much dang money. I can't imagine. Like, I was joking with a friend, I was like, how am I going to drop $200 on a date, you know, take you out to like a dinner and a movie, you know, and end up spending all this money on me and you, and someone expecting this of me, and with the economy as it is, and somebody being like, well, she didn't buy me, you know, they didn't buy me this food, you know, they were cheap, and they didn't buy, like, looking cheap a lot of times is seen as bad. If you're saving, like, I've noticed when I tell people I'm working on my savings, you know, I'm cutting back and things like that, that is a turnoff to a lot of people. They don't want to talk about financial, you know, responsibility. You know, people want to go out and party, and if you're like, oh yeah, I'll pay for your dinner or whatever, I've noticed that there's a lot of times where people seem a lot more willing to engage when I'm like, okay, let's just go spend money. But when I'm like, hey, you know, I'm cutting back, can we go do this instead? You know, people are like, it seems like kind of cheap. Like, so, you know, I mean, it's kind of an impression thing, but it's like, I've got money, you know, that's not really an issue. If I don't have money, I can make money. That's not really an issue. But I do feel for guys who are kind of stuck in these gender roles. I feel lucky being the type of person I am. I don't really have to like adhere to any real rules. I just kind of do what I want. I wear what I want. I can go where I want. Like the types of places where I hang out, it doesn't even matter like what bathroom it is. It's like we're all in here for the bathroom. Like that's the intention, is to use the bathroom on your own and like leave everybody alone. Like it's kind of very open-minded versus these other kind of spaces where there's a lot of people in society that are kind of stuck to these norms and rules that I don't see as bad. Like I see that there is a kind of benefit sometimes to having a life kind of looking like that, you know? Like I understand that sometimes people want to do things their own ways, and you know, that is something that I understand. You know, I'm not the type of person who's like down with men, be disrespectful towards them and like crap all over them because if they don't have any money and all that. And especially young men, it's like I don't know what they're expected to do. It's like, yeah, even if you take a job starting at McDonald's at $18 an hour, I mean, it's honest work, but it's like, realistically, you need 2 of those jobs to be living in a place like LA if you want to have your own apartment and stuff like that. Like, that's the truth. And so it's like, to have all these expectations that a man is going to pay for all your stuff, I don't know. I've always kind of had a problem with it, but it's like, you know, it's also not been like something so directly affecting in my life, because it's just not something that affects me like that. So I'll probably continue this conversation in a while. Got to park now. It's alright, made it in and out of the gym. So let's continue talking about these passport bros. So I'm kind of lumping all these kind of dudes into the same genre, but I'm thinking what's happening is because in society so much is being deconstructed. I mean, if you think about the years that we spent during the Rona, just kind of like before that, 2019 and before, you know, how a lot of us were like in the Matrix, you know, just kind of going along with it. Maybe you didn't really like your job choices. Maybe you didn't really like your choices towards how you manage your expenses. Maybe you wanted something different in life, but just to even try to go there mentally, emotionally, you know, maybe, I mean, I'm kind of speaking to myself here too. It's like, you know, I know how I felt. I know what I dealt with, what I experienced. If I think about my own personal experiences during the Rona, you know, I was kind of sitting on some goals of mine. I was like, yeah, I'm going to move eventually, but right now it's kind of comfortable, you know. I'm paying cheaper rent than anybody I know, and the people I'm living with are driving me up the wall, but it's okay, I can still afford to move. If it gets real bad, I can get out of here. Yeah, this job is like overloading me with stress and leaving me with limited energy to care for my own health and eat properly and exercise properly, and, you know, with the energy being wasted with the housemates and stuff. I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm able to kind of see how, you know, I wanted something different, but I wasn't going for it. I was just kind of like, it's on the back burner. The ideas are on the back burner. But what happened was now everybody that I don't want to see that I'm living with is always home all the time because their work situation's changed. Now, you know, I was an essential worker, so while a lot of my friends were off and getting paid more than they were even making, you know, to be off and have a real break, in a way, like, it was still stressful. I'm not going to say they weren't stressed and freaking out, but, they got a mandatory break. For some of them, it worked out well. For some people, that mandatory break left them very financially limited. But I saw for my own personal self, I was like, okay, like all the plans that I had kind of like on the back burner, those aren't even going to work out. Like my pay rate's not going to cut it for the rent that I need to pay if I do move. That's not going to work. And so, I was like, move with family, get out of that house with those people, make some different decisions as far as work, make my own way financially, be more in charge of my own schedule, my own energy, and do it that way. That's kind of where I landed. I'm not saying my life is perfect or that I did it better than anybody else. I'm just saying, I know I'm not the only one who had that experience. And a lot of people were kind of in a state where they were deconstructing so much stuff that, by the time they were done deconstructing, the goals no longer looked like they did before. So if I kind of take that whole framework and I look at, a lot of males expecting to be, being expected to be the breadwinner, the head of the household, and they're kind of on that same deconstruction route, and then you have maybe women who are kind of, I'm not saying all women, I mean, I know plenty of women that are professionals that, are very interested in equality, and a lot of women that I know who make more than their partners, but, I do think that the pressure's not really there for women to necessarily be the breadwinner unless they're kind of the only one kind of making the money. Then it's kind of like, okay. But I do kind of notice that. And so when it comes to these passport bros, I kind of wonder if it's a part of the deconstruction of like, hey, I want to find somebody who, meets my standards as far as, they're going to treat me not like I'm some broke dude who's not cutting it. Live in a place where, they can actually make ends meet, save money, have money to go out, be kind of feeling like wealthy, financially successful, versus here in the US, where if you're in a place like LA or San Francisco or New York or San Diego or any of these places where the rent is so like extravagant, do you really want to be trying to be 18, 21, making your life early in your career where you're already starting out, not even being able to move independently? I mean, some people do make good money, but it's like, okay, if I go to college and get this degree, that's 4 years out of my life that I'm collecting debt if I do it that route and have to go fast to do it. It's kind of like, what am I getting myself into here? I mean, those are valid questions. I think that, it's a valid approach. And I do feel for men, I feel for males, a lot of them being kind of like having to make these decisions or feeling like pressure to kind of make a decision in this way. Like a lot of these men just kind of, they're not slackers necessarily. They're not trying to be like, I don't like women or whatever, or Western women even, but I feel like it's just how society has changed. If they're gonna actually get their needs met, then they're gonna be forced to kind of do things in that way. And so, I think it's part of the deconstruction of things in society. I think that's probably more of what we're seeing, is people noticing, guys noticing, I'm not going to get what I want here, But when it comes to dating, I mean, that's something that I think, a lot of married people don't really have to deal with that. I noticed that, the divorce rates did increase during the pandemic. A lot of things that were negative kind of increased. And so, there was probably some relationship problems going on in general. I did notice that, someone did mention this, and I did notice that the topic of toxic masculinity became really popular. And I think people kind of take it out of context. I mean, from someone who associates with all types of genders of people, regardless of what gender they're assigned to, what they identify as, I associate with all different types of people, friends, family, on this gender spectrum. And some people have masculinity to them, and they might also be very feminine. That is very possible. There are a lot of femme-presenting people out there that might dress effeminate, might have mannerisms that are effeminate, but personality-wise, they've got a lot of masculine traits. I used to have a boss like this. Me and that boss did not get along well because they were a liar and all these other things. So I would say that boss, being even as a female, had toxic traits. I don't know if I would call it necessarily toxic masculine traits. A lot of it was, there was a lot of, aggression and things like that. But for me, it was more like the lying, the gaslighting, the manipulation, that kind of thing. I wouldn't say that was toxic masculinity. That was just her being a jerk. She just wasn't a good boss and didn't really have good ethics, good morals, integrity. She was just kind of like, I'm in charge, I can get away with all these things, and she was just trying to fly underneath the radar, doing all the shady stuff all the time, and not just to me. And so I know that she was she had issues, but I wouldn't really say that that's toxic masculinity. I mean, I know people who have, I would say what I've noticed is there's a lot of people who have a form of toxic masculinity that's mixed in with this kind of narcissism and kind of lack of sensitivity, lack of compassion, the gaslighting, all these kind of things. And so, yeah, there might be some of that toxic masculinity there where they're kind of just like, I'm in charge, I'm the one, I always need to be the one who's it's kind of like a total ego trip, that they just can't afford to have their ego look like a little bit, they can't take second place, they can't take the back seat, they can't just let somebody win. They can't, that kind of thing, I would say is toxic masculinity. But I feel like a lot of times what we see is a lot of these people, men and women, who have the toxic masculinity have also these other mental issues mixed in. And I think that's more what it is. Because I know a lot of guys that can be aggressive when they need to be, and they're very sensitive, very nice, very hardworking. Most of my guy friends are like that. I wouldn't say that most of my guy friends are toxically masculine. I mean, they can be, but I mean, everyone can be. Everyone can have toxic moments, but it's when it's an ongoing pattern of just toxic treatment of others based on trying to get over on others because of, being able to be more aggressive or more dominating and things like that, when it's really not necessary. I'm not saying people shouldn't be competitive and things like that. I do value that kind of thing, but it's when it comes to toxic masculinity, I think the label has kind of gotten out of control, and Like, I think it's more like there's a lot of people who were raised with this idea of masculinity, or this idea of trying to manipulate and get over on people, which isn't a masculinity thing, it's a mental health thing. And I think there's a lot of men who are mixed into this, women included, but there are a lot of men who are mixed into this pattern of like not being able to show like a sensitive side, and they don't value like any kind of sensitive side, but they want that if they're like a cis straight man, and want that in a woman and in a partner. And then a lot of women aren't really maybe showing that cis feminine straight side to them, that's getting a little flexible as well. And so maybe a lot of cis straight men aren't really interested in some of these women who aren't practicing like extreme femininity. But then also a lot of these women aren't very interested in a lot of the men who are practicing this extreme masculinity. That's kind of how I see it. I don't really know, like, it's hard for me to really say like, oh, these guys are doing this thing. But yeah, when it comes to passport bros, it's like that is one of the most interesting concepts I've come across so far this week. It's just hard for me to really, to really send that negative energy towards men. I mean, I do know a lot of guys that I'm just like, dude, just like the way you are, you need to just get over yourself, like in a way that like I've not seen a lot of women like that. But then there are women who are kind of like, they have some other kind of method of doing toxic things. And I wouldn't call it toxic femininity necessarily. And I think toxic masculinity needs to kind of be looked at to see, like, are we talking about mental health? Are we talking about people with narcissistic traits who can't really deal with the ego side of things, and they can't bear to have their like ego kind of on display, and like that kind of thing, to be put in a position where they're perceived as like with any kind of weakness or anything. I see that more. And I think a lot of guys do tend to need to feel like they're kind of like in a dominant position with each other, especially, like, but if that's just naturally how they are, then so be it. Like, what are you gonna do? I mean, it serves a purpose, but I don't really know. I don't know. It's hard for me to really look and see like this big trend in that way, because most of the guys I know aren't like that. So I don't really know. I mean, there are some guys that I do know that are like that, but I think it's more of a mental issue. I don't think it's like necessarily solely like toxic masculinity. It's just they're so like, taught in a way to be like so like overly masculine that anything that challenges that, they lash out about it. I've got guys that I know that, family members or people that try to stay in my life that are kind of like, they've got some toxic traits, like, because I'm female, they'll kind of do this, like, ask me a question because they think they already kind of have the answer, and then whatever I say, there's no way that I could ever be right because I'm a female. Like, things like that, then I'm just like, I kind of can tell that they don't value me just because I'm a woman and things like that. But also they need my approval, and they can't have me kind of like calling them out on stuff either because I'm a woman and things like that, where it's like, they'll go to all ends to lie about something that I've literally witnessed with my own eyes, and they will literally be like, that didn't happen. It's like, where were you? So it's like things like that. But I wouldn't really say that it's every guy that's like that, and I think that's more of a mental problem. And they just happen to be men. And so I think there's a lot of that other stuff that gets tied into it, but I wouldn't call it necessarily toxic masculinity. Like, it looks like toxic masculinity, but then when I dissect it more, I'm like, nah, I think this is something else. I think it's something else. And so, yeah, like just that kind of like deception and that kind of thing. Like, I mean, to me, it's always like, a little bit of a sign when somebody has like, I'm not going to call it like an attachment issue, but like an issue with honesty. It's kind of like if you can't let people see you for who you really are, and everybody's going to tell a lie here and there, but I'm just saying, like, there's only so long that the lies are going to get carried out, till it's got to come out to truth. And it's like some people will hold on to that for all eternity. And it's like, even when people know the truth, it's kind of like, what's going on here? But then, yeah, it's hard to really call it toxic masculinity. But yeah, when it comes to these passport bros, I mean, I think it's been cooking for a while. I think that might have something to do with what was happening with the divorce rates earlier. A lot of men, and I'm not a man, I can't really talk to this like I'm knowledgeable of firsthand experience, but I know a lot of guys, and I've seen things change for them. But a lot of guys I know are older, and they're in their 30s, and 40s, and it's a little bit different because they're already established with their careers. They've got options, they've got work experience. I don't know what the guys who are like 18, 21, those age of guys, who are just starting their adult life, I don't really know what they're expected to be doing. I don't know what they're really supposed to do. Because they don't have, really a whole lot that they can do, other than make major changes. But part of me also is like, maybe it's not really just a oh, I'm moving for the money thing, or moving for the women thing, or moving to get a traditional woman. I just think also because there's community there for them. I mean, they're not like the only American guy who's moving, so if there's now other American dudes out there that they can kind of interact with, that's probably beneficial to them too. And, I just think sometimes, there is something about how things are so not like, I don't know, I think sometimes people don't realize that things are so like things have changed, a lot over the past few years. So I don't really know what people are really expected to do with that. Like, things weren't going to stay the same. Everyone who, myself included, a lot of us were like, let's just get back to normal. And there's a certain point where I noticed in this year, in 2023, where I was like, things aren't going to get normal. This is the new normal. Things are moving forward. Whatever happened during those few years, things have changed and evolved into something else. And that's just how it is. And so, a lot of these trends, I do believe, are coming from somewhere where people are trying to get their needs met. And I think a lot of, like, when it comes to cis-het culture, it's kind of hard for me to kind of really speak to it. But I do think I have noticed a lot of women kind of saying certain things where it's like, she wouldn't date a guy who's broke, or wouldn't date a guy who's, not fit, and things like that. And I'm like, I did hear this thing once. I don't remember what I was listening to, but it was some guy who talked about like dating theories or something like that. And he was talking about this idea where it's like, if you request something of someone, what do you have to give? So if there's someone who's like, well, I want to date someone who's wealthy. It's like, yeah, everybody wants to date somebody who's wealthy. Nobody wants to date someone who can't figure out how to even like come up with money for the bus or whatever. Like, everyone wants to date someone where you don't have to think about the money part of things and where you can just go have fun. I'm not saying wealthy people just blow their money. I'm just saying, like, that's nice, to not have to think about money. But if you're not wealthy or if you're not good with your finances, what makes you think that you deserve somebody or will easily come across someone, or someone who has wealth is going to want you? Um, and not just wealth, but it's like, I think that's what's happening. A lot of people are like, they want something, but it's like, well, yeah, we all want somebody fit, but do you go to the gym, or are you a couch potato who sits and orders pizzas and sit there and eat it all weekend and like don't go hiking or don't take a walk or whatever? You don't stretch, you don't eat healthy, you never eat a vegetable, and then you want somebody of a certain caliber who's fit and wealthy and all these things. It's like, how realistic is this? How sustainable is that going to be, in a relationship? Like, what do you see yourself doing with this active person if you're not active at all? What do you see yourself doing with this wealthy person if you're not wealthy at all? Like, people want these things. And it's like, well, what do you have to give to a person who's wealthy? What do you have to give to a person who's working on their physique all the time? What do you have to give to a person who's, stable in their career? What do you have to give to a person who values family relationships and is very close with their family members and extended family? And what do you have to give to someone who's like interested in travel and has gone to all these places? Like, if you can't kind of meet a person at least halfway or with something that's going to interest them, it's going to be hard to date. And so I think that's why it's hard for people to date, is because people are stuck in these old ideals of like, I want this, I want this, I want that. But then a lot of people have also kind of let themselves go, and they're maybe not of, adequate caliber to be trying to like look for those kind of people. It's like, that's part of it. I mean, it sounds harsh, but it's like, it is true. It's like, what do you have to give, to another person? Like, it's not just, what am I going to get? What am I going to get? I want from this person. What am I going to get? What am I going to get out of this relationship? Oh, if I don't get that, if he doesn't pay for this for me, if he's not buying me dinners and all this, it's like, yeah, maybe he's buying you all your food and helping you out with your rent, but what are you giving in return? Like, are you nice? Are you compassionate? Do you make him feel like do you show gratitude even, or are you just wanting more and more and more? It's like, a lot of these women who might want from men who have a lot to offer financially, what are these men gonna get from these women? What these men who are wanting these women who are treating them a certain way and all those types of things, like, well, how do you treat her? Some people don't really think of it that way. They're just kind of like, I want this, I want that. But it's like, well, if you have nothing to give, it's going to be hard to get somebody who can give you that, who's going to put up with it long term for all eternity till death do you part. It's like, that's going to be a hard one. That's going to be a hard one. Like, it is give and take on both ends. And so I think it would be best for people to have these conversations when they're dating and just be like, look, this is where I stand on things. Instead of that whole fluff of like, oh, let's just sweep it under the rug and it'll all come up later. It's like, why aren't people talking about their finances when they first start dating? Like, I always look at that. I'm like, if I meet somebody and, the bill comes and they don't even reach for their wallet, and we've never had a discussion of who's paying, and they're always expecting me to pay, that's not right. If we've never had that discussion, that's not okay for someone to always expect me to pay, or somebody inviting me to do stuff and then all the time they need a ride. It's like, yeah, I want to go, but I'm not trying to drive all over the place. Like, maybe I wanted to do things a little bit differently. Like, I'm not trying to like go out of my way. Like, like where I'm at in LA, it's like, do I really want to drive all the way out to Orange County, pick up my friend, drive all the way to Hollywood, drop them back off in Orange County, and then drive all the way home? It's like, that is ridiculous. You know, I'll be driving for probably 3 hours or more out of my day while they get to just kind of sit and wait. It's like, if that's what we've decided, cool, but it's like, this has to be a discussion, you know? People can't just be using each other. I think people need to get better with having discussions about things, and all the things that people were saying in the past. Oh, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about that. People need to be talking about it, because it's going to come out eventually. People need to just start getting comfortable with having conversations instead of ghosting people or, you know, saying that they're unsatisfied. It's like, well, yeah, you're unsatisfied, but did you have a conversation about it? You know, like, what did they say? You know, people don't want to talk about things. But, you know, the way I see it is, it's going to be hard either way. It's going to be hard to let somebody get on your nerves that you really care about and you want to work things out with. It's going to be hard to let them get on your nerves, and it's also going to be hard to deal with them firsthand, and allow them to keep getting on your nerves. It's going to be hard to deal with them. If you've never had the conversation, they're going to keep getting on your nerves. You're never going to find a resolution or have that difficulty and that conflict, possible conflict. It doesn't have to be like a blowout fight or argument or anything, but you might have a little bit of like disagreement about something and a little discomfort, but at least you know where each other stands, you know, versus like sweep everything under the rug. And I think I know a lot of men that are good with communication, but I do see that lacking. That's one thing that I do hear a lot, is that it's lacking. But I do think a lot of women need to know how to talk to men too. I don't think I'm bad with talking to men, but I can kind of tell when there's some guys who kind of like are a certain way, like they need women to be a certain way for them to feel, you know, they need to feel superior. You know, and stick in those masculine roles. And then there's, I'm not saying like men need to like cis straight men, like you need to wear a dress just because it's less masculine. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, you know, with certain things, it's kind of like, you know, you got to have human emotions. You're a human. You know, you can't just be like, oh, like I'm a guy, so I don't have emotions. Like, that's BS. You know, if someone in your family dies, you have emotions. You know, you're mad at things when things don't go right. If somebody cuts you off, you're probably going to get a little upset. You know, if somebody steals your stuff, you're not going to be happy about that. Like, everybody has emotions, you know. But also, guys are taught to handle their emotions differently. And that, I think, is toxic. I think there's a lot of toxic ideals around, you know, with parenting, of how people teach men how they should handle their emotions or how they shouldn't handle their emotions. But I don't know, a lot of food for thought. I gotta go because it's getting late, but thanks for listening.